statutes back into compliance with federal government. Section 2 of the bill deals with how the variable gas tax is calculated. Current state statute states that while variable tax is to be set in an amount sufficient to meet the appropriations by the legislature, the rate shall be set in increments of 0.1%. This bill proposes a small change to existing statutes, which would provide more precision in the way the variable fuel tax is calculated by adjusting the language to go from 0.1% to 0.1%. In other words, we would just be adding one more decimal place. This change is not meant to affect the revenue the department collects in form of variable gas tax and is simply a technical fix to improve some internal calculations. Deputy DeBoer from the Department of Transportation is behind me and can provide more in-depth explanation of the changes being proposed in this bill. Thank you.
Questions for Senator DeKay? Senator Frederickson.
Thank you, Chair Moser. Thank you, Senator DeKay, for being here. Quick question on the first part of the bill that updates the traffic lights indication. Are these things that we already have in practice? It's already implemented. It's just a matter of updating the statute to reflect.
It's just going to clean up the statute a little bit because in one instance you got a solid light, in the other one you got a blinking arrow. So it's going to put everything in compliance. And if there's any different on that, the assistant director will address that.
Okay, so our traffic lights already do all this. They just put it in the statute. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Senator. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Supporters of LB 966. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Senator Moser and members of the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. My name is Khalil Jabber, Khalil-Jabber. I am the Deputy Director of Engineering for the Nebraska Department of Transportation, and I'm here to testify in support of LB 966. This is a bill NDOT worked with Senator DeKay to introduce, which is a department cleanup bill, really, that makes two very simple, straightforward changes to the statute, as you heard from Senator DeKay. The need for the first section of the bill was caused by the Nebraska Supreme Court case in 2022. The result of this case is that city must install signs clarifying whether drivers are prohibited from turning on solid red arrow. Currently, if no sign is present, drivers can treat solid red arrows as a stop condition and enter into the intersection to complete their turn after coming to a stop, rather than waiting for the signal to turn green. However, to align with the federal standards found in the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, as we refer to as the MUTCD, turns must be not allowed at all on steady red arrow signal when they are illuminated. As such, it is necessary to update Nebraska statutory language to reflect that intent. At the same time, NDOT traffic engineering team realized that there were no statutory definition for the meaning of a flashing yellow arrow indicator. And as such, we use this opportunity to find that as well. We have worked with the city of Lincoln, Omaha, and Grand Island, as they are the jurisdictions primarily impacted by this change. These municipalities have the vastity of signals with this type of indication arrow anywhere in the state and express their support for these changes. It's critical that as a state, we have traffic control devices which are used properly with consistently applied definitions. It would be dangerous for a flashing yellow turn arrow to mean one thing in Grand Island and another in Omaha. The background and needs for the second part of the bill is equally simple and straightforward, although they only directly impact the department, though it indirectly impacts the public when they go to the fuel pump. As you know, once the governor budget is approved by the legislature, the department is tasked with setting the variable excise tax to produce revenue equal to the approved highway cash fund appropriation. To clarify the effect of these, they are seeking And I have provided an exhibit for the record which walks you through the process and the math we use to calculate the various part that makes up the fuel tax as a whole, which may change every 6 months. This document shows the total components that are changed and demonstrate that from one 6-month period to the next, it was impossible to maintain the same variable fuel tax due to the statute requiring to be adjusted in increments of 0.1 to 1%. The intention of this bill is not to increase or decrease NDOT revenue, rather is to give more precision when it comes to setting the variable excise fuel tax and overall motor fuel tax. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any question you may have.
Senator Walz.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. I guess I just want to go back to the first part of this bill that you talked about. Am I correct to say that flashing yellow means you can proceed with caution? Solid yellow means you can safely do so.
That is correct, Senator.
Okay. So what happens, or is there an explanation in here for I enter the intersection when it's flashing yellow, but I'm across the threshold, but it turns red before I have completed my turn. Am I correct to say that that does not subject me to running a red light type violations?
That would be our interpretation. Once you engage in the intersection, that means you made that move into occupying that turn while it's the flashing yellow. Therefore, you're entitled to immediately, once it turns red, clear for you to turn once the opposite traffic has stopped.
Okay.
The area where the solid red on the right turn lane, it's a little bit confusing because if we have to install a sign to tell the public that this is an actual stop and you can't turn, because in a lot of different places where it's just red, people are making the right turn lane. So, in the interest of safety, we wanted to make sure that we're in compliant with the NUTCD for one thing, but also to make sure the interpretation is clear across all our cities that actually have similar of these type signals.
So your intention with this is there's no right on red if you have a right red arrow and it's solid.
That is correct.
So no longer would we see the sign above that you sometimes don't even notice because you're not looking for it that says no right on red.
That is correct.
Okay, I'm there now.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. More supporters for LB 966. We have a letter and no opposition or neutral letters. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mosher and members of the Transportation Committee. I'm Elizabeth Elliott, ELIZ, ABETH, EIOTT, Director of Lincoln Transportation Utilities. I'm here to testify in support of LB 966. First, I'd like to thank Senator DeKay for introducing this bill and for NDOT being a great partner in talking through these challenges, because this bill ultimately represents a significant step forward in enhancing traffic safety and streamlining traffic control measures for drivers across our state. The inclusion of the flashing yellow arrow, previously undefined in our state law, but has been in use since 2017 here in Lincoln, is a crucial aspect of this bill. Research has shown that the flashing yellow arrows have tangible benefits, including a notable 16% reduction in left turn crashes and a remarkable 26% decrease in injuries and fatalities. By incorporating this proven traffic control measure into our legislation, we can effectively enhance intersection safety and mitigate potential hazards. Additionally, the bill aims to further define allowable turning movements on steady red arrows, aligning our state standards with the federal guidelines, as previously noted, the NUTCD. This alignment not only ensures consistency with national traffic control standards, but also provides local jurisdiction flexibility in selecting appropriate traffic control devices and clearly defining the meaning of that red arrow signal for drivers. That will allow us to reduce additional signage or signalation and alleviates the strain on the infrastructure resources, and yet improving the overall traffic flow. By enhancing the clarity of the red arrow signal indications, we enhance our drivers' understanding and safety for all road users. Therefore, we ask your support of LB 966, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify, and would be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Senator Bosselman.
Thank you, Chairman Moser. I guess the question I'd have is on the red arrow, right turn. Do you think that if it's not an issue for a stop and turn right, we could change the red arrow to just say red light?
There are, and just do the circular red because we do think the red turn is safe once you've come to a complete stop and the intersection's cleared. But there are certain areas, intersections where we think a red turn on red is increasing the chance of a crash. And it's those intersections where we use those red arrows.
So you potentially could take some of those red arrows off or put some on.
Correct. That's where the flexibility comes in.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Bosselman.
Thank you. Can you tell me how this change will be messaged to the public? So, because that will be, I mean, I'm thinking of the intersection when you get off of 180 to get onto Superior Street, right? You exit and you're taking a right to get onto Superior, it's close to 14th Street. Right now it says no right on red, and that was a huge change. And if I were a police officer looking to make a lot of money for my department, I'd have sat there and run radar on that because everybody stopped and turned right there. And so that change was huge. And I see that potential with this change where you're now adding an arrow that people.
Absolutely. And that's something that we take into consideration with any change. When we installed the plexi yellows, again, that causes confusion. And the more confusion, the more likely of the crashes. So we're really going to take significant steps in trying to educate the public. So we'll be developing some PSAs that can go both on TVs or social media. We'll also work closely with at least Lincoln Police Department here locally and know that there's going to be this period where we're going to have to educate drivers across the community. So we'll work together with them and hopefully be able to allow kind of a little bit of leniency during the learning period throughout this, but we will do enhanced messaging on these changes in multiple different ways.
Thank you. That addresses my concern.
Thank you. Other comments? Thank you so much for your testimony. More supporters for 966.
Red arrow turning right on red issue. Right on red is a significant safety issue for people biking and walking in crosswalks. I can think of one intersection in Omaha in particular where there's a bike lane and a red arrow to prevent people from trying to turn on red when there's bikes coming. And there is confusion there. So I'm glad to see that this will be part of it because I think that will hopefully make it safer in intersections. And to your point, Senator Bosselman, we are going to really have to educate folks on the need to pay attention to these things. We have one question on the blinking yellow arrow portion of this bill, which is that it calls out pedestrians in crosswalks in the language. It does not specify in crosswalks. In 2016, we worked with Senator Kalowski's office to LB 716 at the time that gave bicyclists the same rights in crosswalks as pedestrians. So our only question here, and we'd like some clarification about whether or not an amendment might be needed to insert bicyclists into that language to make sure that basically passed legislation and to make sure folks on bikes are equally protected in these intersections. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Next supporter. Anybody else to speak in support? Okay, anybody to speak in opposition? Seeing none. Is anyone here to speak in the neutral capacity? Seeing none. Senator DeKay, you're welcome to close.
Thank you again, Manager and members of the committee for this hearing on the bill. I appreciate the discussion we have today. I hope that clarifies a lot of the issues with the red lights and yellow lights. I'm glad you diverted the questions to the subject matter experts behind me because I'm probably not the right person to ask about lights. If there are no further questions, I would be happy to try to answer them. Otherwise, appreciate a favorable consideration on LB 966.
Questions? Senator Bossman.
Thank you, Chairman Moser. So, Senator DeKay, can you tell me, I should ask, what you, as far on the change in the calculations of the tenths to 100ths, is that going to come out to be more of a increase or a decrease?
The way it was told to me is that it wasn't going to change. It was just a cleanup on that part of the bill. It wasn't the revenue stream coming forward or not. It's just make things easier to work within the internal workings of the office.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. That'll close our hearing on LD 966. Now we'll have LB 1133, and we received no comments online. Senator DeBoer.
Did you just say you had no comments on my bill or the previous?
Yes, no comments on your bill.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Moser and members of the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. My name is Wendy DeBoer, WENDY-DEB-OER, and I represent the 10th Legislative District, which is in Northwest Omaha. I'm here today to introduce LB 1133 as amended by AM 2151. So I think you have the amendment there. LB 1133 gives Nebraska the ability to have our rail inspectors oversee hazardous waste being transported within Nebraska. The Federal Railroad Administration has a state safety participation program in which states state safety inspectors in authorized safety areas. Current statute grants the authority for our rail inspectors to have authority over track and power and equipment. For example, think of locomotives. LB, as amended by 2151, expands this statute to include authority over hazardous waste. The PSC is here, and I would encourage you to ask them any technical questions. But I will say this, the explosion in East Palestine, Ohio last year started a national conversation on railroad safety and the debate over oversight. Months later, here in Nebraska, we had a rail car explosion in North Platte. And those are reasons why I brought LB 1133. We have avoided what could have been a much worse disaster. Had the wind been blowing a bit differently, had it been a different chemical, who knows what would happen to the workers in the rail yard and the citizens of North Platte or the water we all rely on. Having an inspector in the rail yard authorized to inspect rail carts carrying hazardous waste maybe would help us to catch the leak before it turns into an explosion. So let's try to do that. Let's pass 1133 and give us another tool in the toolbox to be sure that our workers in our communities are safe. Thank you for your time, and I urge the committee to advance LB 1133.
Senator Frederickson.
Thank you, Jim Moser. Thank you, Senator DeBoer, for being here for this bill. Question, do other states have a similar statute in place for hazardous materials?
So my understanding is that and you should ask the people behind me, but my understanding is that the permissive authority from the feds allows us to take up this area. So ostensibly other states would have also chosen to take up this area.
Just to follow up on that is, so with this would require inspections, or this would just allow the PSC to undergo such inspections should they see fit?
It puts the inspector into place. So I'm not sure that it requires specific inspections, but it allows there to be an inspector who can go and check some things out. But I may not have that exactly right, so I'm going to let you ask that to the people behind me.
Thank you.
Oh, well, Yes, we have a question. Senator Bosman.
Thank you. So Senator DeBoer, when I look at the bill, original bill adds section 212 to the language on page 13. That's the only underlined change that I see. And then the amendment says strike 212 and insert 171, 172, 173, 174, and 179.
My understanding is we initially had gotten the wrong area of statute, federal statute to refer to.
Okay, so what does 171 do?
Why don't you ask the people behind me?
Okay. Maybe I don't know. No. Okay, I will do that. Fair enough. They're on.
It's not my day to know everything right away.
I will follow up with them and then with you if I have additional questions.
Thank you.
So you would have somebody from the PSC go into the rail yards, ask for the manifest, look and see what's in the train?
Why don't you ask the folks behind me? I'm sorry, y'all, this is just not my day. So why don't you ask them exactly how this will work? Because I am not as prepared as I like to be.
Well, it sounds like an honest answer. Thank you. All right. Thank you for your testimony. Supporters for the welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Mosier and the members of the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. My name is Kevin Stocker, Kevin Stocker. I represent the Nebraska Public Service Commission's 5th District, and I'm here to testify in support of 1133. With 100 miles of track in operation in Nebraska, the Commission recognizes the importance of ensuring the public safety as well as the safety of rail employees. The most recent data available from the Association of American Railroads show that in 2021, 17% of all carloads originating in Nebraska were transporting chemicals, and 59% of all carloads terminating in Nebraska were transporting chemicals and coal. Recent events in Nebraska and nationally have highlighted the need for increased inspection of railroad safety. LB 1133 seeks to enable the Commission to enforce standards related to hazardous material inspection as part of the Federal Railroad Administration's State Safety Participation Program. The federal regulation sections offered in AM 2151 would require the Commission to conduct independent inspections to determine compliance with pertinent sections of federal hazardous material regulations, make reports of those inspections and findings, and to recommend the institution of enforcement actions by the FRA to promote compliance. The Commission unanimously supports policy that promote rail safety. I would like to also provide a brief historical overview of the Commission and federal regulatory commissions that have evolved since the Commission's original creation. The office was created in 1885 to regulate railroads, and in 1906, the Commission became the Railway Commission officially. Since 1976, the Commission has partnered with the FRA to administer Nebraska's state rail safety program and has statutory authority to assist the FRA in enforcement of federal standards for safety. LB 1133 with Senator DeBoer's proposed amendment would add the necessary references to expand the Commission's authority to assist the FRA in enforcing federal standards as it relates to hazardous materials. The Commission remains consistent in our position. We support safety. The Commission will work diligently to perform the duties it is assigned and will complete those duties as prescribed and in accordance with the appropriation by the legislature. I would like to thank Senator DeBoer for her interest in Nebraska rail safety and to the committee for your time this afternoon. That concludes my testimony, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Senator Frederickson.
Thank you, Chair Mosher. Thank you, Commissioner Soccer, for being here and for your testimony. I don't know if you caught some of my earlier questions, but just kind of out of curiosity, so the PSC would be overseeing this. Is this some, can you walk us through a little bit about what that inspection might look like or that process might look like, or?
Well, there are 5 disciplines that rail inspectors can oversee. Motive power and rail are what we are pursuing today. This will give us an additional inspector to be on scene for hazardous material questions, or if there is an accident, to have an expert trained by the FRA, but will be one of our inspectors reporting to the state on.
Got it. Thank you.
Senator DeKay.
Thank you, Chairman Moser. So is that inspector already on the job, or would you be hiring another person or more people, or how's that work?
This creates a new position at the PSC. The governor has put an importance on rail safety after what has happened in Nebraska most recently in the last 12 to 14 months. This is another discipline that we felt after the chemical explosions in East Palestine and in North Platte, that this would be a good position for Nebraska to have. Nebraska is home to a lot of rail transport.
Senator Walz.
Thank you. Okay, so I wasn't aware that this creates a new position. Can you tell me how that'll be funded, how that person will be funded?
It's going to have to be an appropriation from the legislature that will go ahead and fund this position. The position will be trained by the FRA in accordance to all of their laws. But once they can commit to it, once we have the funding in place, we can go ahead and issue offers for a new inspector. But it will be coming out of the funds statewide.
Okay, so is it your understanding that we would only need one in this position, or, I mean, given the size of our state and the stations that we've got for railroads, would we need more than one individual to do this?
Actually, this position could be one of the disciplines for railroad, whether that be track or whether it be motive power. We feel that one position for hazardous will be ample at this time in Nebraska.
Okay, so what you're saying is one of the individuals already there can be licensed or trained to do the inspections for hazardous materials and whatever they were already there to do.
Not already there. You have to enter into a dual agreement that this person is going to be trained, is
Okay.
my understanding.
Okay. Thank you. That answers that question. So then I go back, and if you're not the right person, we'll try a third time. But the amendment strikes the addition of 212 and then adds a number of other numbers that we're complying with here: 171, 172, 173, 174, and 179. Can you tell me what those do?
They come one after another.
They're considered smallest to largest.
I'm not the right person to ask for that. I know that when we did see this bill first, that we scrutinized it pretty hard, that it was in compliance with the FRA's regulations. So I'm not a lawyer. I can't tell you what those amendments are,
That's
and I'm not
fair.
well versed on it.
Okay, all right. That's no problem. I appreciate your answers. Thank you.
Senator.
Thank you. You said that you'd be hiring and training more. Where would that person be trained at, and what would be the qualifications for that?
The inspectors are trained in state by the FRA, and that all of the hazardous material training will happen in state, but they will pair up with a hazardous materials inspector from the FRA. And that inspector will be trained to FRA standards. So I guess I can't answer where all of the training will happen.
Senator Bosselman? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Moser. First question, is there someone from the railroad that's going to follow you?
I believe there are people in the room. I'm not certain that they're going to
No,
testify.
I saw some head shaking, so
Okay.
I think we'll see that. So we can ask some questions there. I'll save you on that. The question, the individual, because the fiscal note doesn't show no fiscal impact. So the fiscal note doesn't show any additional staffing members or purposes for this. So you mentioned the FRA. So does the federal regulators have someone in Nebraska currently or not?
My understanding is that the feds do have inspectors. I don't know what disciplines that they've been trained in.
Okay, thank you.
So what do you anticipate the inspector is going to find? Do some shippers not properly mark or identify what they're shipping? Or the railroad doesn't follow the proper procedures for shipping some hazardous material, or what do you?
Possibly both of those, Senator. We don't know what we don't know right now. We do know that there have been some serious accidents in Nebraska and around the country. And we may be premature in saying, what are they going to find? Part of it may come from the railroad itself to say, was this shipment packaged correctly? And if we look at it and say, no, it wasn't, that may alleviate some liability that goes to the railroads also.
Are the railroads able to decline certain freight if they don't want to haul it?
I'll defer that to the railroad.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Yes, more supporters? Welcome.
Hello, Chairman Mosier and members of the Transportation Telecommunication Committee. My name is Andrew Faust, A-N-D-R-E-W, and I'm the Nebraska Legislative Director for Smart TD. We have over 1,400 members in Nebraska, from Omaha to Nebraska, and I'm here to testify in support of LB 1133. And on behalf of our organization, I want to thank Senator DeBoer for introducing this legislation. The Nebraska Public Service Commission currently has a motive power and equipment inspector with the appropriations request of the track inspector. This bill will allow the Public Service Commission to hire another railroad safety inspector. Currently, 32 states take part in this program and have statutory authority for a railroad safety inspector to work alongside the FRA. The FRA inspector covers thousands of miles of railroad lines in multiple states. This additional inspector will ease the workload of those overwhelmed FRA inspectors. I want to thank Senator DeBoer and the Public Service Commission for their collaborative efforts on this bill. And this bill shows how much they both care about railroad safety in Nebraska. I want to encourage all committee members to support LB 1133 and protect the citizens of Nebraska. Thank you for today, and I'll be answer any questions you might have.
I have one, I guess. Your organization is a union, basically? Or?
Yes, we're a labor organization
Okay.
in Nebraska.
Do you know the answer to the question? Are railroads required to haul everything that
Yes.
somebody brings to them?
As long as the shipping requirements, the railroads cannot turn down any shipment. We found that out in North Platte during the explosion.
Well,
They
I
weren't
had a
able to turn that
railroad
down.
guy, a friend of mine, tell me that too. I was just curious. It didn't sound, well, it sounded like that could create problems.
Mhm.
Because sometimes you'd be hauling stuff that's pretty hot to handle.
Yes.
Senator Boswell.
Thank you. Third time,
I
hopefully.
do not know the statutory.
Okay, well then I have no
That was once Senator DeBoer, I do know that once Senator DeBoer introduced the bill, the PSC legal came into in contact and said that was not the correct statutes. And that's why 1212 or 212 was stricken. And then the other one, because that specifically states what they can take part in.
Okay, so it's your understanding that these 5 sections that are referenced gives authority to do this state inspector work alongside with the FRA inspector for
Exactly.
hazardous inspections?
Yes.
Okay,
And this bill only gives the PSC the ability to hire an inspector or more inspectors. That's why there's no fiscal note on the bill itself, because the PSC would have to go and ask for an appropriations for the position, just like they did with the tractor.
Senator Bosman, you have a question?
Thank you, Chairman Moser. Well, I think that's the whole purpose for the fiscal note, is if they expect to hire, because the next bill we have coming up, it talks about hiring someone, and they have and they're for hiring that position, so not to be, that's where the appropriations come from. The Chairman Moser asked earlier about a manifest on each train. How is it, Inspector, is that what they're looking to do, or are we looking at spot checks once, twice a month, once every 5th train, once every so many cars? What type of inspections are going to be carried out?
There'll be inspections, spot inspectors also. Those inspectors also show up at the location if there's ever a disaster or an accident, or and it involves hazardous loading and unloading of it even. They go to a plant and say, loaded that way into tanks or into cars.
Do the railroads currently have I'll call it an inspection system they do themselves that they carry out on trains, unloading, unloading materials they carry? Do they have their own inspection process or system that they use?
Yeah, Carmen currently do inspections on the train when the car's placed into the train. If there's a leaky door or a valve that's not secured correctly, then they do their own inspections and take that car out of the train.
Okay, so the inspector that we're talking about, will not necessarily go out and actively inspect every week, but it may be certain locations, certain times, or certain, maybe the North Platte Yard or Lincoln Yard or wherever it might be, they do those inspections. So then if there's an accident, they would pair up with a federal inspector then to inspect the crash site.
Yeah, they could, once the person that's selected is trained, the training's completed, then they're able to go out on their own. The only thing the PSC does not have jurisdiction, and they cannot issue a fine or a violation. They would have to notify the current hazmat inspector, and that hazmat inspector would have to issue the violation.
Yeah,
So they work along with them, but they can only let them know.
right, because I think it's only crossings that they actually can. I think crossings is the only place that PSC really has any active role on
Yes.
rails right now in countries. Okay, thank you.
So if something derails, typically somebody has a manifest what's on the train,
Mhm.
and then so you try to figure out what cars are potential liabilities if they're leaning or tipped over, right?
Mhm.
And then typically you would call the police or the fire if there's a potential public hazard.
Exactly. Emergency response team. A lot of towns and cities have emergency response
Chemical
teams.
response kind of guys. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and both railroads have hazardous material departments that they go around and, offer training to first responders. They are the first on the scene usually if, working alongside the first responders.
And we had an issue once where an alcohol car, ethanol, left the tracks and it was leaning, it was leaking slightly. And we eventually just let the railroad handle it. They had it pretty well under control.
Mhm.
Ethanol is flammable, but it's not as bad as ammonium perchlorate or whatever like they had. North Platte. Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your testimony. More people in support. Yeah, we only allow you to testify once. Otherwise, we'd be here all day. Something would pique your interest and then you'd come back. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your time today. My name is Amanda Snide, AMA-NDA-SNIDE. I represent the Nebraska Smart Legislative Board with Mr. Faust. The FRA has started this program to allow for additional inspectors. I can't speak for them, but I can for myself and those that I represent. There need to be more safety inspections on rail cars. Amit Bose, the director of the FRA, wrote a letter to Union Pacific in September about the 19.93% failure rate of cars in Bailey Yard and the 72.69% failure of locomotives during their inspections, during the spot inspection, days before the explosion that made national headline news. The current inspection instructions for employees like me that work in transportation and take these trains down the road is a computer-based training that takes roughly 5 minutes to complete. This training focuses mainly on the ladders and brake systems. It does not focus on the wheels, which are most likely going to be the cause of a derailment. I strongly encourage you to support LB 133. Available for any questions.
Okay, any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. More supporters? Anyone else to speak in support? Is there anyone here to speak against LB 1133? Anyone in the neutral? Welcome.
Good afternoon, and members of the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. My name is Robert Bavier, R-O-B-E-R-T-B-I-E-R. I'm a Senior Director of Union Pacific Railroad's Hazardous Materials Team. I've been in service for 22 years, going on 23. I have the privilege of leading a team of 16 hazardous materials managers system-wide covering 23 states. And our mission is prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery. Today, I'm going to be speaking about a couple of those. First is prevention. So in our prevention activities, we conduct inspections of hazardous materials. Last year as a team, we were able to inspect a little over 5,800 rail cars system-wide. And how that's done is we look at all four sides of the rail car, the bottoms of the rail car, climb the ladders. Last year, our team climbed a little over 10 miles of ladders for 16 of us. It's a great way to stay shape. And we're looking for loose fittings, improper placarding, nicks, tears in jacketing, releases for sure, proper equipment, communication systems. So the signage and placarding on the signage and marking on the rail cars are appropriate. I've also worked in several states side by side with some of the inspectors, along with FRA hazardous materials inspectors, and they conduct the same type of inspection. Last year, we inspected a solid number of 500 rail cars in the state, and we'll continue to do so. We root cause and analyze, so we're taking that from the point at which we found the problem all the way back to usually the shipper or consignee person that, as you well stated, Senator, Mr. Chairman, that to make that corrective action.
Okay.
With that, our position is neutral. And thank you for your time. Does anyone have questions?
Senator Frederickson.
Thank you, Chairman, for being here and for your testimony. So I think if I'm understanding you correctly, the outlining measures that UP has internally to ensure safety. What responsibility does UP have for the contents of shipments? Is that the shipper's responsibility, or is that like on the railroad?
That's correct. So like you referenced in the numerical value, the 101, the 102, the 172. So those are federal regulations, 49 CFR, that dictates the safe transportation of hazardous materials. The shipper's obligation is to provide hazardous materials in a package compliant with 49 CFR. What our teams do is go, and we're taking a snapshot. 5,800 rail cars is not a lot of rail cars in transportation, right? We understand that. But we're taking a snapshot of that activity and ensuring that those obligations are met. And whether it's 101 organizational tables or the marking compliance or the tank car construction or their fittings, those are all dictated by federal regulation. That's what we were referencing earlier.
And thank you for that. And so I can appreciate your neutral testimony here. Do you anticipate, should this bill pass and go into law, do you anticipate UP would continue your internal inspections in addition to the potential PSC inspector as well?
Yes, we will continue our operations. It's an set of eyes. We work side by side with those individuals. What I would ask is that they do the same thing that we do, and that's finding the problem and working it to its root cause.
Thank you.
Senator Boswell.
Thank you, Chairman Moser. A couple of questions with that too. It was mentioned previous testifier said, I think there's 32 other states may have something similar to this. How does that work how do you see that working in?
Sure.
Is there a common thing throughout the states, how this works? How does that work?
Yeah, so let's take California as an example. That's where I still reside there to this day. So the PUC inspector, that's what they're called. They're public utility inspectors, hazardous materials trained. They are correct. They're authorized by the FRA and they're trained by the FRA. Usually that training is conducted in Pueblo, Colorado, but it's variable. And they're instructed on how to safely inspect a rail car, how to safely inspect a train, what to look for, how to safely work within a rail yard, considering that's a very hazardous situation, just moving around a rail yard. They will get done. They will conduct inspections, and just like we do, looking at all four sides of the rail car, looking for proper placarding, so warning devices for emergency responders, make sure that that rail car is in proper working order, its DOT compliance has been approved, and there's a stencil on the right-hand side of the rail car that will give specific dates as when applied. Then they climb the rail car and look for, of course, any sightings that have a source of release or loose fittings, loose plug. The difference between a release and a loose valve could be something as small as a 1/16 of an inch. So it's important that we inspect them and get those corrections made because we don't want hazardous materials released in transportation ever.
So do they do those inspections no notice? Are they in conjunction with? Do they go in if you have labs, facilities like that? How does this person function, this position function?
Yes to all of the items that you just stated. Random inspections occur. They'll go to a rail yard sighting. They'll go do that. They have complete authorization. It's not as though they need to have permission to be on the rail yard. Certainly, we need to know where they're at in the rail yard to make sure that they're safe and the train doesn't come in upon them. They work in conjunction with us, the FRA. When we jointly conduct a tank car blitz is what it is. So we'll go to an area with a multitude of team members and try to inspect as many rail cars as we can in a period of time, 2 to 3 days. They'll also have the opportunity to go work with shippers and consignees. The consignee is an individual that is accepting a load of product and work with them on how to properly secure that rail car. And some of them even can talk to and speak to the specificity of the transfer, how do transfers actually work? Because there's some technicalities and some science and some experience based upon taking a product from a fixed facility tank, running it through some type of transportation device and getting it into a rail car, and vice versa.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Some of the rail cars could be owned by the people who are shipping the items, and some of them belong to the railroad.
Yes, and the section side of that is, it depends. So the vast majority of what Union Pacific Railroad transports are owned by someone other than Union Pacific Railroad, either the transporting that chemistry or a leasing agent. Union Pacific has a small fleet of rail cars that are designed to primarily haul or transport fuel or diesel fuel for our own resources, waste oil or oils for lubricating.
Or ballast, or
Yeah, and then that wouldn't be in a tank car per se, it wouldn't be hazmat, but yeah, the railroad, Union Pacific Railroad owns many rail cars, but not containing hazardous materials.
so if you see a leak, then what do you do?
So we see a leak, first of all, we isolate and deny entry. So we won't want anybody else coming around the rail car until we can address it. We
You gotta go
assess the
figure out what it
situation.
is.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the first things you do. Remember how I talked about we take a walk around the rail car. So when we're walking a rail car in a hazardous materials inspection, we're looking at that information. What's the placard on it? What does the marking say it may have in it? What's the track list? So I can access the track list from my phone or print it out at one of the stations within the rail yard, and we'll know what's in it. And from that, we address our PPE concerns, report it to our dispatch center, and they notify the locals based on the regulations of the state.
You can't walk up and touch it and see what it looks like.
We haven't done that for about 30 years.
You
don't do
might
that.
melt your fingers.
No, sir. No, I haven't stepped through that. So that if you want, I can step through that repair process or identification.
If you knew what it was, I mean, if it was soap or corn syrup or something, that's different than if it's some acid or something that's.
Correct. The benefit of railroads in general, 99, nothing's ever for sure, but 99% of the time, we know exactly what's in that container. It may take a minute to identify it, but it's in the system. We know exactly what's in the container, so we can dress PPE, our personal protective equipment, appropriately. Sometimes it may be something not much different than we're wearing today. Other times we may be in a full level A suit. It's the space suits that you see. Sometimes it's something in between, firefighter safety gear or a flame retardant jumpsuit that we'd see maybe in the service of a gas company per se.
Senator DeKay.
Thank you, sir. In lieu of events that have happened like in the last 14 months or so, has this expedited the need or want for more inspectors, or have you been talking about this with the expected loads or possible different shipments that will be coming possibly in the future?
I don't know of any big changes. I'm not in our marketing and sales department, right? I don't know of any big changes that are on the horizon. I don't see anything like the crude oil boom in North and South Dakota in 2012 to 2014. It's relatively consistent. Our numbers are consistent. They fluctuate a bit, sometimes up, sometimes down based on the market. Railroads benefit happens to be for the market, a little bit of flexibility.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Oh, and one thing that I did remember in one of the other questions that was asked, the railroads are obligated, Class 1 railroads are obligated by the common carrier clauses that we transport hazardous materials safely, right? And we can't refuse. So if it's in the 49 CFR 101 table, and that table authorizes what mode of transportation a certain chemical could be in, if it's certified to operate in the rail and it's being transported in a DOT package that's approved for that chemical, we cannot refuse it.
Okay. Thank you for your testimony. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any other supporters? Oh, I'm sorry, we're in neutral. Come on up. Apologize for that.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Jeff Davis, JEFF, DABIS, appearing here on behalf of BNSF Railway to offer neutral testimony on LB 1133. That's what LB 1133 is trying to do. The Federal Railroad Administration already has people doing these inspections in Nebraska in what's called Region 6. So whether you want to supplement that work, that's your choice. What I want to spend my time here today is talking about what BNSF is already doing and what the rail industry is getting right. On average, 99.99% of all of our hazmat trains arrive without incident. And our safety vision is to get to zero accidents, zero injuries. Over the last 10 years, we've reduced the number of our mainline derailments by almost 50%. We take a multi-layered approach to safety, incorporating it into every step of the transportation process. We have a safety plan for every hazardous material we transport. That includes risk identification, where we proactively determine and prioritize the sources of the risk for the material, making sure our equipment and facilities are designed for safety, as well as using PHMSA's risk-based routing selection, speed restrictions, commodity-specific safety briefings for our employees, environmental hotlines, and to help employees approach others about safety, remote monitoring of those trains, increased track inspections on those routes where the data is provided to the FRA. We're doing more than 450,000 miles of track a year with automated geometry track inspections now. The presence of equipment detection technology, BNSF has more than 4,000 wayside detectors collecting data on every locomotive and rail car 24/7. We use analytics and algorithms to sort equipment detector and track detection data readings daily. In conclusion, 2023 was a record safety year for BNSF. We had the lowest injury frequency rate in our 175-year history. The Heartland Division headquartered here in Lincoln led the way, 9 injuries for every 200,000 hours worked, roughly 100 FTE. We are focused on what amounts to preventing a handful of elements for every 100,000 hazmat trains. So I want to make sure that everyone knows that we are safe and committed to getting safer.
Questions? So I'm going to ask a question and then you can decline to answer it if it gets you into trouble. So they had a situation in North Platte, that's not your railroad, but they had perchlorate and then they had wood pallets. Is that a potential safety hazard, or is that just a free cap and stance that the perchlorate leaked and it blew up?
Okay. I know nothing about what happened in North Platte.
Sure.
What I will say is my understanding is that the shipper, whoever's product that is responsible for packaging and labeling that material.
So it's identified correctly?
Correct.
And so that it stays in the shape and form that it was shipped in all the way to its destination?
Correct.
Okay. Senator Boswell.
Thank you, Chair Mosher. Real quick, does the state have rail inspectors? I think the only inspections we do to the PSC is our crossings. We don't have anything. In your statement, you have in here that kind of leads me to think that we have rail inspectors. So as if the legislature wants to make rail inspectors hazmat inspectors, what does that mean? We don't have rail inspectors, so it's on the.
Well, I was a little confused myself about whether, looking at the fiscal note that was 0, are they going to be cross-training someone that's there existing, or are they
Right.
And they gave me the impression it's like, okay, the PSC is going to cross-train somebody that is already there.
That explains, and I appreciate that, because I think if you look at the bill, it doesn't say that they're going to add more people.
Right.
And that's probably, if the moves forward, it's probably an amendment we might want to make in there so that we do get an accurate fiscal note, so we have an accurate picture as to what they're expecting to do. So just want to clear that up. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you for your testimony. Anybody else in the neutral? Seeing none, Senator DeBoer.
Thank you, everyone, for such a good hearing. I apologize for not being prepared at the beginning with some more specific answers, but I do have answers now from Senator Bosin. Section 1 is a general definition section, and then 172 will indicate what qualifies as hazardous materials. Section 173 talks about requirements for the shipping, how you can do the shipping of these materials, and requirements for doing inspections of those materials. There's additional requirements in 174. I'm less clear about that one. And 179 is talking about hazardous waste, which is transferred by the rail tank car rather than a traditional rail car. So what happened was we needed to specifically say what authorities we were giving to an inspector. So the initial section 212, which was originally in the bill, was one that dealt with participation in the safety participation program in general. But it turns out that what we needed to say wasn't we're authorized to do that and authorizing that bill, but that we needed to talk about the specific things which are these federal rules that they are authorized to do inspections about. So these are the subject matter of the hazardous waste materials that they're going to talk about or inspect. If there are any other questions, I will now attempt to answer them that I've had a minute to catch my breath.
Thank you for your testimony. Thanks for bringing the bill. That'll close our hearing on LB 1133. Now we'll be going to LB 1212. Welcome.
Thank you.
Floor is yours.
All righty. Good afternoon. Oh, I have the wrong chair.
Suzanne yet?
Yeah. Good
Oh,
afternoon. Sorry. Chair
That's a
Moser.
compliment.
Chair Moser, members of the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. My name is Lynn Walz, L-Y-N-N-E, and I represent Legislative District 15. Today I'm introducing LB 1212 that was brought to me and is a comprehensive approach to rail safety. As this committee is well aware, rail safety is a hot topic nationwide and especially here in Nebraska. Just last week, there was in Cairo. 3 weeks ago, there was a derailment in Kennard. In November, there was one in Sydney. In September, there was an explosion at the rail yard in North Plant. In June, there was a derailment in Bennett. Derailments and other issues have become all too common in our state. And an analysis by the Lincoln Journal-Star found that Nebraska had the 5th most derailments in the country. They estimate that a train has derailed in the state roughly once every 7 days. In fact, the Bureau of Transportation Statistics recorded 54,539 train derailments from 1990 to 2021. States have been back and forth over the ability for states to regulate rail safety measures, and we're seeing many states across the country move forward with their own measures. LB 1212, that's in front of me, is our own approach to Nebraska's rail safety needs. This bill is mirrored from one that has been considered in Colorado and has received a recommendation from their Transportation Legislative Review Committee. Additionally, a few weeks ago, Iowa Senate Subcommittee on Transportation approved a bill to require rail companies to install and maintain train defect detectors on railway branch lines. So LB 1212 does several things that I will try to go over with you briefly. First, the bulk of this bill only applies to Class 1 railroads and not Class 2 or 3 that do not exceed restricted speed. Additionally, the bill does limit train length to no greater than 8,500 feet if it's carrying hazardous substances. A key point of this bill is that it requires the railroad to have an operational and properly maintain wayside detector system, including a hot bearings detector and dragging equipment detector installed at least every 20 miles. As part of that requirement, the railroad must submit to the Public Service Commission a report that discloses the location of each detector, the characteristics of each detector, the operational status of hot bearings detector, and dragging equipment detectors. This bill also provides that a train must be stopped and investigated if a defect message is received. This bill also updates our current statute not allowing cross block for longer than 10 minutes unless it's continuously moving or railroad's control. A crew member is also permitted to report to a crew member's designated union representative for a violation of this bill, an injury of a crew member while operating a train or in a yard service, or if there's a death during the operation of a train or in yard service. Also allows a designated union representative to a railroad's place of operation during reasonable hours and give reasonable notice. This bill also provides for fines if portions of it are violated. One of my favorite parts, though, of this bill is that it also provides that railroads will offer training to each fire department that has jurisdiction along tracks. This training is over the general hazards of dangerous goods and how to handle any incidents with them. Finally, the bill requires railroads carrying hazardous substances to have insurance coverage adequate to pay for cost, damages, and liabilities arising out of accidents. This bill is really meant to be a comprehensive approach to rail safety measures that should already be happening. LB 1212 really just gives the state the ability to have checks and balances to ensure that our communities and our constituents are safe. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, although we will have rail workers who are experts coming up behind me.
Doesn't look like we have questions, so thank
Right.
you.
Thank you.
Supporters of LB 1212? Greetings.
Good afternoon, Chair Mosier and members of the committee. My name is Tim Schramm, Timschram. I represent the Commission's 3rd District. I'm here today on behalf of the Commission to provide testimony in support of LB 1212. I'd like to thank Senators Walz and Jacobson for this bill. LB 1212 recognizes the importance of safe and efficient rail operations to Nebraska and would add safety training accountability measures to Nebraska law. We understand that the proposed requirements in this bill are intended to prevent or minimize the risk of potential tragedies similar to which occurred in East Palestine, Ohio. The Commission understands that the preliminary NTSB reports indicate that the East Palestine derailment was likely caused by an overheat bearing, but the federal legislation regulating standards for trackside detectors and adding other safety measures is currently stalled. Rather than waiting on federal legislation, which may or may not be passed, the Commission is supportive of the additional preventative safety measures in LB 1212. We support the bill's requirements that railroads offer training to each fire department having jurisdiction along the tracks. Further, it relates to the enforcement. The Commission supports the additional tools that LB 1212 would provide and believes safety requirements in this bill become more meaningful when companies must account for them through reporting. The Commission supports these measures and will do its best to implement them in a manner consistent with the legislative intent. While block crossings can be a nuisance, more importantly, we have been concerned about the safety risks cannot get through to get to a call for help, or when children feel obligated to climb through a stopped rail cars to get home from school. These types of complaints prompted the Commission to open an investigation related to frequent and prolonged block crossings in Hall County. This investigation led to a complaint and ultimately a stipulated agreement. However, the railroads maintained throughout the proceeding that the Commission lacked jurisdiction, stating any attempt to regulate crossings was preempted by the Interstate Commerce Commission Termination Act of 1995 and the Federal Rail Safety Act of 1970. A number of states have crafted legislation to address this issue. Unfortunately, as you may be aware, states that have adopted block crossing laws and uniformly unsuccessful when these laws are challenged. As a result, while the commission supports block crossing limitations, we believe that any attempt to enforce such legislation would be challenged in court. This concludes my testimony. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Requiring fire departments along the route to be trained could be pretty substantial. And there are towns every 8 miles along the railroad, so you could have hundreds. Well, what do you think about that? Dozens, certainly, in Nebraska.
That's correct.
And does the bill describe what kind of training, or just that it has to have training?
I believe the way I read is hazardous, like the earlier bill on hazardous materials. But some behind me that could answer that better than I.
Okay. Senator Dawson.
Thank you, Chairman Mosher. I want to speak mostly to the fiscal note. I think that it appears that the only thing that's fiscally is potential hiring a contractor to figure out what the insurance requirement would be is $25,000. But it looks, if you're going to do fines and penalties, maybe there's hearings that has to be done, there's inspections that need to be done. Probably have to hire more people. Shouldn't that fiscal note?
I talked to
Shouldn't that fiscal note really reflect that?
Well, the commission already has employees in place, the Department of our Transportation, which is also part of the railroad division. And then we have other administrative staff. So during the hearings, unless it's really prolonged hearing process, I talked to our staff at the commission this morning on that, and I looked at that fiscal note as well.
Yeah, I guess, the previous bill has a lot of some of this stuff in it, but it says they're required to hire a new person, at least one person, if not more. I think that look at they're adding quite a bit to the responsibility duties and insurance requirements and potential fines that you have, as well as I would think there has to be inspections done with that. So I guess my question is I guess, the fiscal note, I don't know if it's really taking in everything.
There was an amendment filed, and the commission did have a fiscal note filed, but with the amendment, there was another fiscal note filed that's at LFO right now that apparently, I apologize, the senators don't have.
Okay, I just think that there's a lot being put into this bill that I guess if you have staff that's available, that's not doing anything to pick up these extra duties, I guess you don't have to, but it seems to me it's at least an FTE or more that you'd have to bring on board just to meet those needs, but that's your call.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
More supporters for LB 1212.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Jerry Stillmock, Jerry, Stillmock, STIL, testifying on behalf of my clients, the Nebraska State Volunteer Firefighters Association, the Nebraska Fire Chiefs Association, in support of LB 1212. Thanks to Senator Walz and Senator Jacobson for co-sponsoring, Senator Walz for introducing, particularly section of the training aspect. Let me hit on 3 items. First of all, Nebraska's volunteer firefighters, they are encouraged to take an awareness level of training. There's 5 levels of training for hazardous materials from kind of, Senator Moser, what you had said earlier, you identify what it is, don't touch it, get away from it, don't go near it. Awareness, operational, a little bit more skills and training technicians. They're able to go into the hot zone, if you will, evacuate. They're trained on how to use personal protective equipment. And then specialists, the highest level you could imagine. The fifth level completes out with incident commander specificity training. So that's one item. Even at the awareness, the very basic level for first responders, they are taught the use and guidance and how to apply the Yellow Book. It's an emergency response guidebook that takes a first responder to just that awareness level of how to read a placard, what the placard contains, what the number applied to that placard contains, and then just an understanding of how to use that manual to identify hazardous materials. My other point was, Senator Moser, a great question. It's like, how much could this cost the railroads to be able to? So right now, under Nebraska's Volunteer Fire School, it's put on each May in Grand Island. Approximately 1,200 to 1,500 volunteer firefighters, volunteer first, including emergency medical service providers, show up, and they're able to take a hazardous materials class. The railroads actually come in, co-coach it, co-teach it. It's limited to 30 class members. So a way to assist that would be volunteer fire departments historically for years have entered into mutual aid agreements, and those departments in a mutual aid area or region of Nebraska share responsibility, share training, and cooperate. So there would be one method to hit a region of in one episode, one training, one Saturday, where the railroads conceivably can come in and train more than just one or two departments. So a lot of reasons to support Section 7, and we hope that the committee would consider advancing the bill. Thank you, Senators.
Senator DeKay.
Thank you, Chairman Moser. Thank you, Mr. Stillman, for being here. A couple quick questions. Number one, that at fire school down in Grand Island, is that just regular training, or is that specific training, requested training that they bring in a specific instructor for hazardous waste? And is that delegated toward communities along the train routes, or is that for all communities that might be dealing with hazardous waste all under one umbrella training?
It would be for anyone who wanted a designation of who may enroll or who may be in the 30 unit class. The training is offered, but I don't believe it arises to the level of that awareness training. I think that would have to be done separately by somebody from the Fire Marshal's Office Training Division that offers services to volunteer departments, Senator DeKay.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your question.
Senator Frederickson.
Thank you, Chair Moser. Thank you, Mr. Sturlock, for being here in your testimony. So you specifically highlight Section 7, so the training component. So, and maybe I'm piggybacking a bit off of Senator DeKay here. So my understanding is that the railroads currently do offer the training. There's just no requirement to attend the training because they can't require, obviously, firefighters to attend their training. How do you envision this will change what's currently occurring or improve that?
Yes, thank you. I called a couple of fire chiefs throughout Nebraska for this afternoon, and I asked that very question because I anticipated maybe somebody would ask it, sir. So the hot road communities that are serviced by volunteer fire departments, they are able to call. They shared with me in their region, if they call UP, they are able to arrange for UP to come out and do specificity training for what the fire department may ask. The problem is with the over 490 volunteer fire departments in the state, that issue, and not all railroad locations, sir, to that class 1, particularly where Senator Walz' bill would be directed to. They just don't have that ability or time, and it's not required. I think generally, if they want it, the volunteer fire departments, and request it, the arrangements will be made by the railroads to come out and do that training. It's those that don't ask the training, that aren't aware that maybe there's something more that they should know that concerns our members, because it's a volunteer organization, sir.
Sure.
And what you don't know, sometimes obviously may hurt you.
So my question is, so
Sir.
if I'm understanding you correctly, so it sounds like it's more of a lack of awareness that the training is available, because my understanding is the training is available. They're just not aware that they are able to get the training. Am I right?
That may be a fair statement. I could not challenge it because the people that I did call said, yes, they are able to. Pardon me, while I go marketing for the volunteer first responders, is they're receiving more and more and more requests to participate in providing safety to the citizens and tourists of Nebraska. That how much do you ask for? And in the inundation of trying to help and what to ask for. But I have to agree with your statement that you made. Yes, sir.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking if the railroad's already providing this, this bill won't change that at all. It's just a matter of opting into the training is the concern here.
The fact that it's going to be a two-way communication. Right now, it's a one-way. Hey, will you come out and give us training? Yes, we will. This way, it would be both agencies, volunteer fire and rescue, and the railroads. The railroads would be required, seems like an inducement to help the burden of the volunteers. Yes, sir.
So you see the benefit of the bill that it will sort of catalyze it and sort of require the railroad to be more proactive in offering it. Is that your understanding? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for your questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Senators.
More supporters for 1212? Welcome again.
Hello again, Chairman Mosier and members of the Transportation Telecommunication Committee. My name is Andrew Faust, ANDREW, FOUST. I am the Nebraska Legislative Director for Smart TD. I'm here to testify in support of LB 1212. And on behalf of our organization, I want to thank Senator Walz for introducing this vital rail safety legislation. LB 1212 addresses many ways to prevent accidents, injuries, and possibly fatalities. I will not have enough time today to address all parts of the bill, but I do want to highlight some of the most important ones. Number one, wayside detectors. Detectors prevent potential accidents like the ones that we had last February in Senator Ibach's district and last October in Senator Lippincott's district. We have confirmed that Union Pacific is shutting off these detectors and that BNSF is disregarding the messages sent just like what happened in East Palestine, Ohio 1 year ago. This bill holds the railroads accountable for working and maintaining detectors. Number two is hazmat training. After the explosion in North Platte in September of 2023, we found that first responders have not received proper hazmat training for over 4 years. This bill will require all railroads to provide annual hazmat training to the first responders with railroads in their jurisdiction. And lastly, number three, train length restrictions for trains hazardous substances. On the AAR Association for American Railroad website, which the railroads often cite as authority, it states in 2021, the median train length of a class one trains on class one railroads, meaning half were longer, half were shorter, was 5,400 feet. Percent of the trains were longer than 9,800 feet, about twice the elevation of Denver, Colorado. And fewer than 1% of trains were longer than 14,000 feet, about half the cruising altitude of a commercial jet. But this information is false. Union Pacific reports their average train length from 2021 to 2023 was 9,339 feet. The concerning issue is that rail crews cannot hear defects over the radio when the train is at such a length. If the train crew cannot hear the defects from the detectors of the crew of the cars hauling hazardous substance, then we cannot stop the train, set out the defective car. This bill alleviates those concerns in such trains to a length of 8,500 feet. I want to encourage all committee members to support Senator Walz's bill and protect the citizens of Nebraska. Thank you for allowing me to speak today, and I'll be able to answer any questions that you might have.
Senator Boston.
Thank you, Chairman Mosier. Miller, how frequent are the detectors on the rail? I think it was 20 miles in here. Is that normal? in other states bearing detectors?
There is no regulations on detectors currently from Federal Railroad Administration. So some of the railroads, they have them, they're just scattered all over the state. There's no
So
specific.
there's no
mile.
states really does any specific distance.
Yeah, there's no specific distance.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Catlin?
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So there's no regulation over the distance between the detectors.
Yeah, there's no regulations, period, over detectors at all.
So if detectors are turned off, how do you know if detectors are turned off? How do you know if they're on? What is your experience with the detectors? Are they serving the purpose?
We've gathered information directly from Union Pacific that said in September of 23, a specific detector was only running 7% of that month.
Only running 7% of what?
Of September of 2020.
You mean only 7% of the time the detector was on?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So Union Pacific, this where I stated in my testimony where I said that Union Pacific is shutting off the detectors and BNSF is disregarding the detectors. I know for a fact BNSF is disregarding the detector because I have a picture of a broken wheel that led to a derailment in Senator Lippincot's district that derailed 30 coal cars. That broken wheel was found on the empty train traveling west, was loaded with coal in Wyoming and traveled back and derailed 8 miles away from the original detector that found it. I sent an email to all the transportation
Yeah, I feel like I'm
committee
remembering
members.
that now. Okay, so, okay, I think trying to wrap my head around 7%
Yeah.
of the time, what is the efficacy of even having it turned on of this? But thank you.
Senator DeKay?
Yes, real quick. So if that broken wheel was detected here, how come, and it went out to Wyoming and filled with coal and brought back, how come it wasn't replaced somewhere along the line if it was seen in the?
So originally the detector found it, and it's almost like an X-ray machine. The picture of it, is plain to see that the wheel was cracked. To my knowledge, Fort Worth, Texas was notified of the broken wheel from the detector. They sent an email to Alliance, Nebraska. That car went out in Alliance, Nebraska. The decision was made to send it on to Central Wyoming to be loaded. And then no one notified the carman at the coal mine to set the car out there, and it was on its way back. And then after that, before the car derailed, the decision was made to set the car out in Lincoln, Nebraska. So it traveled over probably 1,000 miles. It would have traveled after about 1,000 miles after the detector first responded or gave the information to Fort Worth, Texas. So that's why I stated that their disregard for messages from those detectors.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
The 7% was for one particular detector, but they
Yes,
may
that
have
was
had
one.
other detectors that were working.
That location of the detector was west of Bailey Yard, which is the largest classification yard in North America.
In North Platte.
Yeah. It was directly west. So any incoming train, they could have found the detector would have sounded, gave alert to the carman or the inspectors of the car, and then the car could have been set out in North Platte. But then it went through specifically in Gothenburg, right downtown Gothenburg. Last February, there was a derailment because of flat spots on the wheels.
Okay. Senator Boswell?
Thank you. Can you explain for me some of the correlation between the train length restrictions and hazardous material? Is there you said the median train length is 5,400 feet.
That's what the AAR states, but that information is false.
Okay, what is AAR stands for?
Association of American Railroads.
Okay, so what is your contention that the median length actually is more accurately?
According to quarterly reports and year-ending reports directly from Union Pacific's website, from 2021 to 20, the average length of trains was 9,339 feet.
So we'll just, for rounding numbers, use 9,300 if that's okay. And so your request here is 500, which is actually longer than what the AAR even says, regardless, right? So you're giving them more length.
Yes.
And less length than what you think is the current actual numbers.
Yes.
And can you explain for me the reason behind how that leads to the safety? Is there longer cars derail quicker, faster, more dangerously? What is the correlation there?
What we found over the years is the radios that are up in the cab of the locomotive, the train will go over the detector, and the detector will give a warning to the crew after the entire train is over it. Well, if it's over 10,000 feet, the radio signal won't alert the crew that they have a defective car in their train because the radio signal is not strong enough. So if we limit it to 8,500 feet, that's a pretty good length that we've come up with, that we can receive radio communication from the detector after our train has gone over it.
Okay, so is there any particular reason that when the locomotive goes past it, that it doesn't alert them right away when there's a wayside detector that goes off?
The locomotive?
Well, you said that's where the radio is, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so why, once the defective wheel goes past this detector, doesn't it immediately send that?
It reads the whole train. So after that last wheel on that last car goes over the detector, then the detector sounds, it'll say no defects, or it'll say defect in axle 400. And then we count back what axle that was. But it cannot read until the entire train has traveled over the detector.
So they're not real-time detections in terms of car 17 had the detector go off, car 35 had it, so it's not dinging you every time one comes back.
Yeah, it'll tell you the whole train.
Okay.
So if there's multiple defects, it'll say axle 35, axle 102, axle were, defects.
And it's just not in real time, so it's not telling you that till the whole train goes past. Okay. And your reason here is that the distance after 8,500 feet is too far for that radio to make that consistent connection.
The signal.
Okay, thank you. That was my question.
We've also found that the train length, we're working on a patent that was developed in 1870. The first patent for railroad knuckle was in 1873, when cars were, trains were 20 cars long. Now we're talking about trains that are, 3 miles long, the potential of 3 miles long. And the weight and the force of those knuckles, it's not built that way, That's why we limit it too.
When they put the train together, don't they put some engines in different places to kind of equalize that?
They're not
pressure?
required to do that unless it gets cold or like a grade, if it's operating on grade. So that means like a hill or stuff like that. But mainly they use distributed power is what they call it. They'll put them in the middle or they'll put them at the end of the train, and that equalizes it, but it's not really, not for that purpose. It's to maintain the air going through the entire train, because when it gets too cold, it'll freeze up the air valves.
And then the air brakes will go on,
Yes.
or you can't get them to release. Okay, other questions? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
More supporters? Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Jacob Forsgren, OBFORSGREN. I am the Nebraska State Legislative Director for the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. I'm also a maintenance of way worker living here in Lincoln. I help maintain railroad tracks and right-of-way for a railroad operating in Nebraska. I come to you today to show support for LB 1212. On February of 2023 at 8:55 p.m., a train carrying vinyl chloride derailed in East Palestine, Ohio. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the disaster that is still ongoing, all caused by an overheated bearing on a train carrying hazardous material. What I'm sure you aren't as familiar with is that 3 hours and 5 minutes prior to that derailment, a similar derailment occurred due to a similar reason. At 5:50 p.m., a BNSF train derailed in Rulo, Nebraska. Thankfully, this one did not result in hazmat being released. However, the cause of it is why I am here today. This derailment was caused by a wheel that delaminated as a result of an overheated bearing. This train had set off 3 hot box detectors or hot bearing detectors prior, designed to warn of this problem before it results in disaster. These warnings were ignored twice, and by the 3rd warning, they found the train was too long to fit into a siding where the car could be set out safely. As a result, they were told to keep going. The car derailed 3 miles later. Warnings being ignored, coupled with being too long to clear the main track in pursuit of profit causes this kind of thing. And we must protect the stakeholders. We must protect the stakeholders from the shareholders. This derailment did not end in disaster, but it certainly could have. The car that derailed was then dragged across the bridge over the Missouri River. The potential for disaster was massive. This bill could be a huge start in protecting Nebraskans in a way people of East Palestine wish they would have had a year ago. Let's protect Nebraskans before the next disaster happens. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Senator Bosman.
Thank you, Chairman Mosher. Educate us on this, what you just went over and what we've heard before. So you mentioned hot box, you mentioned detection. So you have a train on a rail going east-west, one track going down. You have a detector go off. How is it then that you manage that train or that detection, it probably depends on what it is, to keep that train safe or not? When does that train stop? When do you switch it out? When do you fix it? How does that work? Because you've got rail traffic going east, you have rail traffic going west, and
I think,
could you help me understand that?
Yeah, sorry for interrupting, Senator. I think they found in this instance was typically you'll get that train onto a siding where if you have one track that runs east-west, you'll have another track adjacent to it at one point that is only so long where you can pull a train, stop it, and then another train going the opposite direction can pass. In this instance, the train was too long for any nearby sidings to pull that train and stop it to get that car off of that train. And so the instruction was to continue on their trip until they could reach a siding that would have been long enough, and 3 miles later it derailed.
So forgive me for educating, you're educated, that's what that's. So you have a car and it's got a hot bearing, it's got a broken wheel, and you pulled off on the side track. Do you bring a maintenance train in there then lifts that car up to remove that wheel and replace it in place? Or do you just continue on with the train at a slower speed? How does that work?
At this point, that I don't know that I'm qualified to answer. I do track maintenance, so I see from kind of a 30,000 foot view. That might be a better question for that might be in the machinist portion of it that actually fix the train cars.
Okay, thank you.
But oftentimes, what I can say is that when they have a car that poses a risk, oftentimes they will split the train up, leave that car on that siding, put the train back together without that car, and then continue on their journey. And then at some point, someone can come repair the car, the wheel, the bearing.
Sure, maybe it probably just depends on where the location is at the time and, you know, the things surrounding it where they can.
I imagine you're correct.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Senator.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you for the opportunity.
More supporters. If you plan to testify, if you could come up, that would save a little bit of time. Welcome.
Hello again. Thank you, Senator Moser, Senators on Communications. Appreciate your time. My name is Amanda Snide, Amanda, AMA-NDA-SNIDE. Again, I'm with the Smart TD Legislative Board. Working on the railroad, I get to see a lot of accidents. So far in this month alone, I've seen 5 derailments in Bailey Yard. I've watched cars go through retarders or the braking systems meant to stop them, yet they fail. These cars rolling freely until the crews that I represent take it upon themselves to take action and stop them before they could run in to the loaded hazmat cars on the train ahead of them. You don't see this in the news because it was a close call and we stopped anything bad from happening. September 14th, the explosion of a hazardous chemical called perchloric acid had occurred in the rail yard. While the authorities did an outstanding job of warning the public, executing an evacuation zone, and maintaining as much transparent communication as possible, the railroad failed to let their own employees know what was going on. In most cases, employees returned to work within a few minutes, not knowing what chemical was in the giant cloud on the north end of the yard. The siren that's to be sounded when a hazmat chemical is released in the yard never sounded. The emergency plan was updated after this incident, and I'm very thankful that they allowed Director Faust and myself to be a part of that process. I'm also a volunteer firefighter and EMT, and I've been able to attend the trainings provided by the railroads and the shippers of hazmat chemicals on how to handle railroad emergencies specifically. First responders need more access to training for how to handle these situations, not due to their lack of understanding, but as catastrophic derailments and incidents are ever increasing. The training on how to handle them needs to as well. As track maintenance has seen a significant decrease in recent years, this isn't due to those that do the job being unwilling. It's the forced reduction in their staffing, the increase in territory to the overburdening of their days in order to save the carriers money, but at the cost of the safety of everyone on or near those tracks. According to the investigation done by the FRA, the derailment in Gothenburg last February was due to a defective wheel hitting a defective track. Among the damage was maintenance truck parked next to the track that was staged there, prepared to fix a known issue with the track the next day. This derailment could have been prevented. In 2015, the FRA issued Safety Advisory 2015-01 recommending the use of Walz or wheel impact load detectors to improve rail safety. These detectors read kips or 1,000-pound force. The recommendation is that cars at 80 kips be replaced when in a repair facility, and cars with 90 kips should be replaced at any location. The car in question read at 130.6 kips. This value should have raised alarms for months prior to this derailment, but crews were never notified that those defect detectors were going off. In closing, I ask that you help make the railroads more safe by allowing the Public Service Commission the ability to hold the railroads accountable.
regarding rail safety. And we've talked about rail safety for years. And again, I think that there are some really senseless accidents that we could avoid. Today, we heard a lot of ifs. We heard a lot of, we're working on it. We heard a lot of, we govern ourselves. We heard a lot of whens, and we're in the process of, or we're making progress. But until that happens, let's pass this comprehensive bill. Iowa and Colorado have already taken steps to reduce derailments and protect their communities. So rather than waiting on federal legislation, which may or may not pass, let us, as Nebraska, take the necessary steps to protect our constituents and our crew members. Thank you.
Questions for Senator Walz?
I just have a point of clarification. So some of these, I can certainly see a relationship between derailment being reduced with trains that are shorter or being broken up at the crosswalks. But the insurance portion of this, that's kind of the last section of the bill. Can you tell me how train derailments are avoided or prevented based on hazardous material insurance when in that, what that connection is?
I will get back to you on that.
Okay.
Okay, other questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for your testimony. That will conclude our hearing for today. We're going to have